Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most popular work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And before we get into the show for today, got a fun show, got some really fun chapters. Actually, maybe this episode represents the most fun and least fun chapters in the entire story. We'll see how we go. Anyway, before we get into that, just a few quick housekeeping notes up the top. Note number one, the Duff Discord is public. I know we announced this a few times, but we keep getting people coming into the Discord being like, oh, I didn't know this was public. So it's public. You don't have to be a patron or anything. Anyone can just join. The link to do that is to go to duffmedia.com/Discord. You can just join it and talk about Wildbow stuff, talk about video games and TV shows and your 5 favorite action scenes.
Yeah, there's a lot of Power Reflections talk that goes on in there that doesn't make it to the episode because we might talk it to death in there.
Yeah.
So that's an incentive to join. It also make it easier for you to join the game club, which I definitely recommend. So yeah, check it out.
Or just other things like Duff and Chill streams. We'll announce them every so often in there as a way to find out when they're happening, what they're about. Anyway, so that's fun.
Well, our next one is with Malia and Jenny, which I'm very excited for.
Yes, speaking of things we're doing with Malia and Jenny, good tee up on that segue there, Elliot.
Thank you.
The other thing to take note of, to kind of announce, I suppose, is that we've got another fan art contest coming up. It's called the Pale Conflections. Is that right?
I don't know how you meant to pronounce it. That sounds right. Yeah, Pale Conflections. That's our team up name.
Yeah.
For Pale in Comparison and Pale Reflections.
Mm-hmm. A fan art contest. The theme is siblings. I think we'll have some more info on this at the end of the show, but you got about a month to do some siblings related fan art, so get into it.
Yeah, there'll be a link in the show notes as well to the full page with all the the boring rules and shit because we actually give those to you on certain people we're going to talk about today.
Great segue into False Moves 12.1. This contest with our foe Maricica really starts to ramp up. And how would a Fae contest start if not arguing over the semantics of the rules of the contest?
Yeah, and it's just frustrating right from the get-go because despite all their efforts, the trio, or well, I suppose a quintet really, because Liberty and Snowdrop have been dragged into this as well. They've basically just walked into a situation where now they have to argue semantics and do rules lawyering against a fairy, which is just worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
And we knew this was coming from the end of last arc, but this chapter really opens up and starts hitting you with yeah, they're fucked.
Yeah, the feeling of this chapter is they've already lost the contest, really, and they're just arguing about how bad the backlash against them is going to be.
Yeah, it's almost like picking the flavor of their loss. Yeah.
It's glum, isn't it?
It's. I mean, yeah, there's a real sort of frustrating negative vibe to this chapter, but just as an aside, I just loved this right from the get-go conceptually because I don't know if we touched on this last week, but this was a murder mystery, but I think we always sort of knew when justice became a theme early on that it wasn't just going to end with the reveal of who done it.
Yeah.
And what I love is you then sort of think, oh well, there's going to be the trial against the culprits perhaps, but this is Wildbow, so you couldn't sort of have it be that easy. So we're also going to sneak in a sort of trial against the main characters, the detectives, which is just such a fun idea and also such a great way in a story that's talking about the imbalances and unfairness of the system, having the detectives end up in a kangaroo court that kind of highlights all the worst ways this shit can happen is just so perfect.
Yeah. It really is great. You're right. I love the thematic relevance of it being a trial and having these kind of series of trials, I suppose, where we get to see, okay, argue for the justice you want applied to these conspirators. I mean, this one isn't that, obviously, but I'm assuming we'll get more of that. I think it's great to be like, hey, the justice system is flawed, so let's arrest these characters and then see what our version of the justice system, a better version, should be. I think it's just a great kind of thing to be doing. That doesn't apply to this trial.
No, I think that's what's so great about this trial is it's such a great extension of what we saw in Maricica's interlude. Like there was the stuff with the dancing and all the stuff with the consort where it was like all this bullshit. There were all these rules and they weren't taught them. They just had to like learn it or die. And that's
Mm,
essentially where the Kenneteers end up in this trial. It's just they're not, already hundreds of year old fairy who can handle that shit. Like this is Finnea is just constantly pulling unfair bullshit because she knows the rules and they don't. Um,
mm,
it's like it's this frustrating loop we're in where it's like she'll make some challenge that you didn't know she could do and she gets it, and then when they sort of try to counter it with something similar, theirs is invalid because of some petty technicality that we didn't really understand was a problem before anyway. Like, it's just it drives you nuts that there are all these rules and they don't know them.
yeah, it's pretty frustrating, isn't it? I mean, like, I think frustrating is the key emotional beat of this chapter. It's just so annoying. And I've kind of, I don't know, I think I get a bit frustrated, and that frustration finds its way to be vented at the trio. And I don't think that's fair because, like, yes, maybe they're not doing as perfectly as they could, but it's probably unrealistic. It's just so frustrating. And I'm very glad that we get the next chapter, both the Cherrypop stuff and the end of it where it's the trio kind of turning it around a bit, because after this chapter you just need something to cleanse the palate a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I really needed. I was lucky. I got to read these chapters back to back this morning, and it was just like after 12.1, I was so glad to open 12 today, find out it was a cherry pop interlude, and just be like, oh, this one's going to be a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think Wabo knew that after doing us so dirty in this chapter, he needed to give the people what they wanted.
but yeah, no, I just like again, I just love that you stick your detectives in an unfair trial like this, just because it just like it's so perfect. I mean, I guess I don't know. I'm thinking back to like obviously stuff like this happens in real life. Like for some reason, Orange is the New Black. I guess because I rewatched some of it recently, is jumping into my head as just like people were constantly having shit like thrown at them in that they didn't understand because they wouldn't have grown up in an environment to know this stuff, but those rules still apply to them.
Mm,
And like just it's something the Kenneteers have maybe lost a little bit of sight of in some respects that we'll get into soon with some of the others. So it's so great to see that kind of flipped on them, just as a reminder as they get into the end game that like if you don't really know some things, this stuff can just feel like unfair bullshit, even if it seems fair to you.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We're in the Kenneteers' head, so I'm not capable of seeing anything other than the bullshit that this is.
Well, so there's one part you wait, you've pulled out the quote here, just like
Mm,
where the Kenneteers can't contest the assertion that they were here to throw Maricica slash Finnea
yeah,
off balance,
yeah.
and I have to. I think this is one of those things where the fairy actually has a bit of an argument because I feel like we briefly raised it as a concern way back when they first started talking about this with Rook in like 11.6. But the idea of like bullying Maricica into being on their playing field by like throwing goblins at her felt like a kind of shitty move. Like the idea
Mm,
of, oh, she's a fairy, so she hates goblins. So if we like surround her with goblins and make her super uncomfortable and kind of challenge her being, that'll put her off balance and then it'll be more even. And like I get it because that's what you have to do with a fairy, but it still feels shitty.
yeah, I mean, this is the thing though. Is it shitty? Yes. What like the main thing to think about from this is like you can't engage the Fae on their level. You can't play the game against the Fae, right? And I know
Yeah,
you kind of thought about this as well. As an example, they bring in the Aurum, who's kind of like the Faeest of the judges, right? Rules over
yeah,
I mean, the quote from 11.3 is the Aurum Coil manages new rules of discourse such as music, drama, or technological. And I'm like, new rules of discourse like drama, like the Aurum is so here for all the dumb shit that the Fae are pulling. And it's just not how you can play. Like, you just can't do that. And so,
yeah. I had the same thought. Like bringing in the Aurum was absolutely a mistake because like
yeah.
I think we've talked before. Like my primary read on the Fae is that they sort of represent all of the bullshit we make up about ourselves, and at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that's kind of what society
Oh,
is.
it's 100%. Yeah.
That's still a good thing, but like society's made up bullshit, and that's kind of what the Fae are. And so just like seeing this go down, I was like, oh, bringing the Aurum for the fairy thing was definitely a mistake. It's like bringing like a barrel of gasoline to a firefight. Like you don't bring the representation of society into a fight against the epitome of society.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly, right? And so you say like, yeah, it's a fair point, and I'm kind of like, I guess it is, but you can't even acknowledging that it's a fair point is playing the game to an extent, and that's just how you just can't do that. Like, there's another one here where Verona's like, she thinks to herself she has to play the game back and starts doing like counterpoints and being like, oh, maybe I can request a sidebar, blah blah blah. And like, sure, they score some small points over the course of this chapter, but the fact that this chapter goes the way it does is kind of an indictment of that strategy, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work.
Well, and this is the frustrating thing about fighting the fairy, and why, like, at the end of the day, I kind of concede that the goblin plan was probably a good one. It's because you can't fight them with fairness and civility, and like when that is gone, I don't know what to do.
Mm,
Like it drives me nuts. It reminds me of some of the stuff we talked about with Alexander and Bristow, where like the Kenneteers just kind of had to be shitty in some ways because the system and the odds were so stacked in Alexander and Bristow's favor.
mm,
And it feels a little bit like that with some of this stuff because yeah, like I don't know, how do you combat the fairy in a fair way when fighting them in a fair way plays into their hands and they're going to abuse it? Like I don't feel like I have an answer for this. Like, what do you do in a way, like, especially from like Lucy's perspective? She's really focused at the moment on wanting to be able to do these things and hold her head up high afterwards about how she did it. And I don't know how you can do that against the fairy anymore.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I actually don't know if it's possible. I mean, like, the only thing I could think is to win the engagement and then offer the fairy a olive branch is the only way to be able to do it. But even that, it feels wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I don't, yeah, I'm just doing circles in my head. Like I can't. Every time I think of something, it's like, well, that's not really, yeah, good. Like that's a problem. Like the
Yeah.
fairy kind of represent every, well, when they're being malicious, the fairy represent everything that's kind of wrong with society. And then I don't want to take civility away, but you also can't use it. I hate this.
Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, Finnea, the fake Fae, has a sidebar with the Aurum, which seems to go very well, suspiciously well, and a lot of the terms of this contest end up being determined in secret.
Yeah. Um, I do want to give uh Finnea credit for this one moment where Lucy says, "Bullcrap! You know what you're doing, and you know what you've done here." And Finnea responds, "If that is a condemnation of me, if that is a condemnation of me knowing what I'm doing, then it would explain what you've done here." And I got to give her credit for that. That's a good burn. Um, like, because I guess we'll get into this. We probably won't, but like later, Miss sort of phrases Finnea as like a fairy that's at Maricica's level, but with very different strengths.
Mm,
And that just added like another angle of why I love the concept of this trial so much, because the Kenneteers came into this as in their goat, lizard, wolf form as a kind of switcheroo. So it's like, oh, she'll be fighting against, the parts of us that she's not expecting to. And Maricica's just subbed herself out in like a very similar-ish way.
mm,
Um, it's just such a beautiful maneuver to like, in a way, bamboozle them with their own strategy again.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? So should we talk about this bullshit sidebar? Like, again, it's like what like I already have rock bottom trust of the Aurum, and this doesn't help. Lucy
No.
asks, "Would we be happy with this?" And that question is completely dodged. So, the question that this bears is the Aurum being an unfair judge here? What does that even mean?
I mean, obviously, next chapter, the parallels between this and the Edith trial become more explicit. But like, this reeks of the same suspicious bullshit that went on. Do you remember that moment where the
Yeah,
Sable
yeah,
just like
100% I do. Is that something that's going to happen in every single trial? Like,
like it's just this is like a very different flavor, but it's that same bullshit where like
yeah.
one of these judges disappears with a culprit for a bit and comes back, and suddenly like all this shit's happening, and it's like, are we going to talk about like how bullshit this is?
Mm,
Um, like, yeah, I don't know. This sidebar like is much worse than anything that ever happened in The Good Wife because, as you said, it just comes out and there's so much like, oh yes, remember the thing from the sidebar? I'll concede point 3 from that. Or it's like, yeah,
hmm.
okay, and it's like this is so fucking unfair.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's bullshit. It's clearly bullshit.
I'm just like holding on to some like small unrealistic tinfoil that maybe Finn is actually setting herself up to lose or wants the Kenneteers to win or like I don't like if Maricica is expecting her to win, then if she loses, that hurts Maricica, and maybe that's what she brought up in the side. But I don't know.
Mm,
I'm absolutely grasping at straws.
yeah, I don't know. It's rough.
I mean, like we get to the thing where later on we learn that it's like quite explicitly a reflection of not just how they were going to tackle Maricica, but also what they did to Edith.
Mm,
And maybe that's it. Maybe what's being tested here is their commitment to their own like values of justice.
hmm.
Like maybe they just win this by sticking to their guns. I don't know. Like I'm trying to think. Do you remember? There's like this quote that really sticks with me. It's from like the final episode of Firefly, where this guy talks about how like psychologists have to get psychologically tested before they're allowed to practice, and the
Mm.
guy in the guy in the episode talking about how like surgeons should have to get surgery performed on themselves before they're allowed to be surgeons. It's a stupid comparison in the episode, but um, like
Yeah,
here,
interesting. If the
like this is a
but then
test of the Kenneteers' sense of
who
justice.
is setting this test up? I
Well,
can see how it's a test thematically and narratively, but is Finnea bought into that? Is the Aurum bought into that? I don't. That doesn't feel right to me.
I mean, Finnea says she's not Maricica's ally. Like, if there's a way that she can sabotage,
Hmm.
like, I don't, again, this is also me kind of grasping at
That
straws, but I'm
yeah.
like, I could
Mm.
see a way that this unravels where, like, the reveal is that actually, that what they were being tested on here was their commitment to what they've done. Like, basically, having shit thrown at them and them standing by their sense of justice.
The Finnea saying that she's not Maricica's ally rings like bullshit to me. I mean, like the counterpoint to that is you are acting like her ally right now. What's the difference between someone
Yeah.
acting like an ally and an ally? There's no fucking
It's
difference.
it's very shit. She'll stab her in the back the second it's worth it. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Or and again, like the other side of this is we get 2 reminders next chapter. Maricica is still obligated to help the Kenneteers live long and full lives,
Mm,
and I just have to believe that leaving them with Finnea like this, like, has to be against that. Like leaving them
yeah.
here in a trial against a malicious fairy. Like if there's a genuine chance that she's going to like let them get sold to the fairy courts or whatever the fuck, like that just has to be in breach of Maricica's
Yeah,
contract.
in a sick way, the worse that this could go, the better they can use it against Maricica later.
Yeah, and maybe that's Finnea's thing. Maybe that's the whole like Finnea wants like the more Finnea wins, the more it hurts Maricica, and that's actually like her argument in the sidebar. So I don't know, but like
Mm,
like, that's the interesting thing about Maricica next chapter is we see her and we get these reminders that actually either like she believes it or she's got some plan that means that it's technically true. Like she wants the Kenneteers to have long and full lives, and she makes that abundantly clear next chapter. And that's such an interesting wrinkle in how the rest of this arc is going to unfold. She is reminding the universe that that is a thing she has to do. So unless there's a bullshit interpretation of that we haven't thought of, yeah, there's only so bad things can get for them while she's the primary antagonist.
mm, yeah, interesting. I don't know. I still have no idea how this could play out, right?
No, no, yeah, me either. I'm just like throwing spaghetti at the wall.
I just want to pull out one more thing from this, which is the Kenneteers don't score a lot of points during this, but they do score some points. And one of the times where they force Finnea to backpedal and adjust is when Finnea says something like, "Fuck, what is it? It's like a really clunky food metaphor, right?"
Yeah, I think it's when they ask for like the ability to take a recess, and she goes
Mm.
on about how that's unfair because they were here to surprise her or whatever. And yeah, then she gives
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
like
yeah,
they're
a
asking
clunky
for
food
whipped
metaphor.
cream on top of, yeah, it's nonsense.
Oh yeah,
A-
yeah, it's like whipped cream beside the meal or something. Which what are you talking about?
yeah, clearly she has no idea what humans eat. Anyway, um, and Lucy's response is, "What? Fuck you, fuck off with that." And Liberty adds, "That's freaking ridiculous." And that's it. That's all that they say, and that's enough to get Finnea to like backtrack and to score a point, a small point, but a point.
Hmm.
And it's kind of another moment to just hammer home the idea of like, if you're actually playing the game and arguing with Finnea, you're losing. The only way to win is just to not allow her to just basically call off how ridiculous the shit she's doing is. And I'm gonna I'm jumping ahead in our notes here a bit, Elliot, but the overall feeling that this leaves me is so strongly this feeling of, and this is especially relevant when we're recording this episode, of like an alt-right person who's begging people to debate them. You know what you know the kind of stereotype I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but then, like, if you ever stoop to that level and engage with them as though what they're saying has any basis in fact, you're already kind of normalizing their
yeah.
behavior and like
You've legitimized them by entering an
it,
official debate with them. Yeah,
exactly. And even if you do debate them and win in that debate, if they're defining the rules of this engagement, they'll just make shit up or I'm explicitly referencing this Steven Crowder situation. I don't know if you're aware of this, Elliot.
I'm not.
It's fucking hilarious. Steven Crowder, big alt-right YouTuber kind of vibes, begs Ethan from H3, to debate him. I mean, Ethan's not a political pundit; he's just kind of another YouTuber. And Ethan agrees, and then surprises him by bringing on an actual political commentator, right, to debate against him. And Steven Crowder kind of throws a hissy fit and runs away. But then, key to that, later releases a video where he's edited this engagement to point out like any of these tiny moments that he's won and use it to be like, I actually won this debate and blah blah blah, and kind of
Classic.
spun
Yep.
it, right. And I mean, it's the classic thing of like, even if you're playing that game, you're losing, and that's what it's like with
Yeah.
the Fae, right? There's no way you can engage with them on their level and walk away victorious. Even if you feel like you're walking away victorious, they still have the ability to spin it. And the key fact that will be true that you can't deny is you normalized their way of doing things.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. Like that's so much of what's going on here. Like, and it. Okay, I know we've already talked about this. I'll do it so quickly, but like that's what's so frustrating here is the reason the Kenneteers are losing so much right here is because they're trying to be
They're
fair
trying
and
to,
talk
yeah,
this out,
yeah,
and
and
like
that's bullshit. You can't do
they've
that.
lost. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Like the
exactly.
the fact that they're trying to talk it out is what's costing them, and I just fucking hate that. Um, yeah, yeah. I love that call out you just have of like the time where they actually managed to score a few points is when their response is just "fuck you, fuck off with that."
Fuck you,
Like,
that's shit. Like, that's not anything. We won't even, debase ourselves by responding to it. And
yeah,
that's the closest they come to doing anything.
yeah. I hadn't noticed that, and I love it. Like that's such a great call out.
So yeah, the trio start to try and take a bit of control, and they start pursuing Finnea on her connection to Maricica, which is what this whole trial is actually about. But Finnea and Maricica were clearly cautious about this, and there are no real points to be made there. Yeah, it's a telling moment, right? They almost pin her on something, but it's clear that the grey line here is where Finnea and Maricica live and breathe, and it doesn't work. In fact, it gets spun to be points against them.
Yeah. But something we haven't talked about up until now is so in this particular moment with the Maricica stuff, Verona kind of takes the front spot on the arguing. And she cops it for kind of losing this, and she instantly gets like quite sick.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it gives the vibes that not only has her practice taken a hit, but the kind of downsides of the alchemy that she's done is amplified.
Yeah, exactly. This feels like our taste test of what's to come if they really lose this challenge. Like this is a minor gainsaying sort of vibe. Is the
Yeah.
impression I get. And if they lose properly, well, apparently there's a chance they'll get sold to the courts. So
Yep.
who the fuck knows? But um, yeah, I mean, I guess this this is a Verona chapter, and we barely talked about her so far, and part of that is because like she's taken this six berry mixture, and now is just kind of like it's really thrown her for a loop. And in this moment, it's like her headache and stuff starts to get worse. And that's like, like Verona having a headache in the back of her head that's buzzing is just that's our signal that she's in a really bad spot. And I feel bad that part of me was kind of like, see, Verona,
Mm.
you turned other, and look how it's gone. Um,
Yeah.
like she's so long romanticized turning other, and I always think that that's not been a fair assessment of what being other is, and it's kind of great that I feel like she's starting to realize that as this turns, like, and even before it, honestly, like she can't really think straight earlier on in 11.13. She was kind of uncomfortable as it was happening. I think this experiment maybe should have happened earlier because it is sort of reinforcing the idea that being other isn't super cool, happy, fun times.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully that there's something good to come out of this, I guess.
Yeah, if she survives long enough for this lesson to land, it'll be great. Um, I mean, she actually, I do want to give her credit though. Earlier in the chapter, she tries to get turned into a fairy as part of all this, which I very much enjoyed.
Mm.
But she gets a little bit sad that she didn't get her free chance to try out being Fae. Classic Verona.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Verona. So yeah, the contest is set. They're in the forest with Fae all around, and these Fae are fitting the Kenneteers for clothes.
And like, this really escalates just the amount of bullshit going on. Like the demerits start flying left, right, and center immediately.
Mm.
And there's just
Yeah.
clearly no winning. Like Avery and Lucy get demerited for like talking back. So then Verona stands there quietly and they're like, that's rude. Also 50 demerits. It's just like, fuck this. Like, there's no winning. They'll just throw demerits out for whatever the fuck they feel like. There's no discernible system to this. It,
Yeah.
it it's a level up and a crystallization of the bullshit we were talking about before in like court systems that you're not familiar with, where you just get punished for not knowing the rules that you weren't taught.
Yeah. It's it's really rough. I really hate it. And I know I'm meant to hate it. I hope. Otherwise, I don't know. But like, I think especially because Lucy's my favorite Kenneteer, and this is like especially designed to fuck with Lucy. I
Yeah.
mean, it's fucking with and kind of weakening the identity of all of the Kenneteers, but God, it's so. I hate it so much.
Did they actually touch her hair? Like I it didn't come up, so I don't think they did, but they went to again, which is just, aggravating.
Yeah.
But because we're in this sort of, I think Verona says she took the spirit of Long into her. So because we're kind of seeing everything through this warped, like Long Verona perspective, she
Mm,
doesn't follow up on the thought of whether Lucy's hair was actually touched. So
mm,
I hope it wasn't, but there's a chance it was.
yeah.
Also, sorry, just back on how unfair all the demerit shit is. They take demerit points off Snowdrop for disagreeing about whether they were going to do the trial, and then when they try to explain that Snowdrop has a special rule of discourse, they get more demerits, and it's just like the epitome of fucking stupid. Like that
Mm.
was the part that really got to me. I was like, "Fuck off! You can't. You know."
Yeah. Um,
But as the flip side of that, uh, we get a very touching moment where Avery finds out that Liberty put this whole costume together for her, kind of specially.
yeah.
It's just, like Avery's like love language is just so clearly like, is it service? Is that the one where you just do things
Yeah,
for
acts
people?
of service, I think.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
and like you could tell that this is just like in amongst all this bullshit. There's just a moment where Avery's like, "Oh,
yeah, it's nice to have those little moments to keep us going, huh?
yeah."
But yeah, the court continues to award demerits to the trio for not playing along with this bullshit. For Lucy and Verona get a message that Lucy's house has been infiltrated. and Lucy continues to slip as the trial carries on. I don't have anything else to say about this. I don't. It's just so it's designed to get under your skin, probably literally, and it does.
Yeah, I almost shit myself when we found out what the text said. I was like, "Oh, fuck! Of course, that's what Maricica's up to." Like, I mean, this is such a great moment from a story perspective because we've had so much build up with all those wards, and it's like right when we already thought we were on the bottom, Wildbow hits us with like something that we've kind of been waiting to see, which is somebody going after their families.
Yeah, it's happening, and we'll see it next chapter.
Before we go, I just wanted to end the talk of this chapter on a hypothetical, which is so they there's one point where the fairy is saying they're going to sell 1 3/4 of a person, and the way the 3/4 of a person works is that she will be given the option of serving out 3/4 of her remaining lifetime, and then retain the ability to buy back her freedom at 1/3 the auction price she raises,
Mm.
or forfeiting 3/4 of her humanity to be rendered, butchered, and sold before the remainder of herself is rendered free once again to find her way in the greater realms of other and man. Which would you choose?
Probably number one, I suppose.
But
Or
like
maybe number two. I mean, the
number
part
one's
that's
kind of
chopped off.
well, number one's kind of bullshit because where are you meant to get the money to buy back your freedom? That's my question.
Yeah, and if they can make up demerits that have you serving 3/4, they can just make up demerits during that time to get the extra time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's leaving you, but then like losing 3/4 of your humanity that can't be good.
Yeah, the leftover quarter might not even know. Might not even. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I guess
true.
maybe that's what happened to like Brett.
Oh my god, Brett went through this trial a couple of months ago. It all makes sense now.
A couple of months ago, I think longer than that ago earlier.
Oh,
Anyway,
a year or so ago? The
yeah,
divorce is fairly recent.
yeah, true. Anyway, let's get out of this chapter and go into False Move 12A, Cherrypop. We're in Cherrypop's head for this one.
Oh, I was so what a dream come true.
Um, and before we get into this, I just want to point out something that I missed on my first read that maybe other people missed too, which is even the fucking links and stuff on this page are spelled wrong. So to be clear, the title of this arc is False Moves, and normally the interludes are 12 point whatever, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this one is False Move 12A with no bullet point. It's not an interlude, it's an interrude. And instead of previous chapter and next chapter, it says previous chapter and next chapter. It's just great. Like, it's so good.
I only noticed the chapter misspellings. I missed the rest of it. So thanks for pointing out like interrude. I totally missed that, but like it's like because I noticed the chapter ones as soon as I started reading this, and I was like, because I'm reading this like 4 days after it came out, so part of me was like, oh boy, that's a bit embarrassing for Wildbow. These are both grossly misspelled after. Because like the first word of the chapter is just cherry pop,
Cherry
and I
pop,
was like,
yeah.
oh,
Oh
that's
yeah,
beautiful.
here we go.
And then
Yeah.
and then obviously like just a cherry pop interlude. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Like this is the perspective we needed to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's the interlude we've all been waiting for, right? Starts out with Cherrypop being scared, but she has the stones to try and get to Jasmine's house anyway.
she's so precious, right? Like we all know Cherry is like this insecure, annoying piece of shit a lot of the time, but when you see in her head, it's just exactly what you expect from, well, a child who's like that. Like she's lonely and wants recognition, and it just comes out as her being an annoying asshole. But from her perspective, like she's just trying so goddamn hard, and she's actually so kind of pure and innocent, and I just fucking love it.
Yeah, she's great. Actually, before we get into it, let's give props to Ace of Sword, who was the one who made the prediction we talked about last chapter, where talking about Cherrypop's stubbornness and stupidness kind of interacting perfectly with the cursed stone, and talking about how Cherrypop's going to get buff, which is in the process of happening now. So I just think Ace deserves props. It's such a good, hilarious premise for this chapter, for the first part of this chapter at least, because like, I mean, this entire chapter is dripping with dramatic irony, with this vibe of like Cherrypop just not getting stuff that we as the audience know, and it's so hilarious and juicy every single time. Like every time Cherrypop is struggling through the first part of this chapter, she'll make sure to readjust the stone under her arm to make sure it's perfectly secure before she tries again, and it's just so good.
Yeah, I agree. I think this chapter balances that marvelously. I've got a bunch of quotes spread throughout this script that I'm going to pull out just because they make me laugh every time I read them.
Mm.
Yeah, like as you say, like, it's just, she just she grabs the rock every fucking damn time, and she's like, "Oh, I barely made that, but at least I've got my rock with me." And it's just like, you fucking dumbass. Like,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's rough. But having said that, it's also like a good mix of like tragic and inspiring, I guess.
yeah.
Like
Well, I mean,
Cherry,
that's cherry pop.
yeah, like she's so beaten down by life, but is so determined to just keep trying, and it's very wonderful, especially with all the stuff that she thinks about Snowdrop, which is also hilarious and wholesome.
Yeah, it's something that the chapter makes fairly explicit towards the end is this whole thing where like she barely notices that everything is suddenly a lot harder, like, and that the rock is making everything worse, and it's just because like that's just how life is for Cherry all the time. Everything is hard for her all the time.
Mm.
So she just doesn't notice that the rock is making things harder because I guess, the world she's in, comparing herself to everyone else, she's smaller, stupider. It, it it just is always harder for her. So she just doesn't notice when she's cursed, or in this case, carrying around a rock that's cursing her and making it harder. It's yeah, I mean, tragic and inspiring is
Yeah,
just exactly it. You're like, oh, this sucks, but also
good
you
on
can't
you.
help but fall in love
Yeah.
with what a little trooper she is.
Yeah. As well as seeing her internal monologue still fail to understand Snowdrop's backwards talk is just so fucking good. It's never going to get old. She thinks about things like, oh, Snowdrop told me this one time that if she died, she'd definitely 100% come back to life.
So
And I
that's
thought
good.
that was really cool. And I'm like, fucking hell, Jerry.
And that's used to like also to help frame like this idolization she has of Snowdrop,
Yeah.
because she doesn't just love Snowdrop for all the stuff we'll get into in a sec with like how great Snowdrop is. She literally thinks Snowdrop is immortal and can come back to life. And so the idea that something scares Snowdrop is just like maximum shit your pants time. Um, it's so good. And then yeah, so just this way she idolizes Snowdrop, I think really captures the vibe of this chapter, which is just like another extension of all the stuff we've talked about with Goblin society being peer pressure bullshit and goblins kind of being kids. Like Cherry Pop's just lonely, and she just wants people. She doesn't even want people to treat her well. She just doesn't want to get left in a dark room with broken bones for a couple of days. Like she set her bar for what she wants out of a crew absurdly low, and Snowdrop is still effectively the first person to ever like meet that bar.
Yeah.
Um, like so, yeah, she just thinks the absolute world of Snowdrop just because Snowdrop's the only person who hasn't treated her like shit. Like it, again, tragic and inspiring.
Hmm. Yeah, she's great. I mean, she's obviously a favorite character of ours and continues to be so. This interlude is everything we've ever wanted, I think.
Yeah, and she touches on how Toadswallow is like one of the other few people who's kind of given her some respect or whatever, but they, her and Toadswallow are very different people, so they don't actually get on. And you can
Mm.
see, like, this to me just fully sells Toadswallow's plan to put Snowdrop as the Goblin Sage, because Snowdrop is just constantly pulling out the best of goblins, like Cherrypop. Like this just cements that as a brilliant idea. I think we knew it was anyway, but like this is the evidence right here. Like
Yeah.
she's gonna fix Cherrypop, and like that. If you can do that, you can do anything.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we get this scene of Cherry uh, trying and failing to get over a river,
It's the most
and
epic. Like this is like a quarter of the chapter, and it's so
yeah,
fucking like because she keeps calling it a river. I'm willing to bet this is like a 2 meter across like stream, right? Like it's like I bet you this is one of the narrower parts of the creek that goes through Kennet.
mm. Yeah, it's so good. I mean, the fact that it's built up to be this epic thing is what makes it so
Yeah,
perfect, right?
because we know it's not, and wait, it reminds me
Well, but
again
it
of
is to Cherry, but it's not to
well,
literally anybody else. Yeah.
yeah, it reminds me of my favorite interlude from Ward, which I guess I won't go into because this isn't like a Ward spoilers podcast, but it's an early one. People probably know what I'm thinking of, and it had some similar-ish vibes, just with a competent like point of view character.
Mm.
um, but like, yeah, just watching Cherry fucking turn crossing a what I assume is more or less a creek into this fucking epic journey is just so good.
Yeah. It is great, isn't it?
Like this is her version of like getting to Mount Doom in Mordor. Like
Yeah. But well, she fails. She almost does it, but she fails and almost drowns before she is rescued and resuscitated by Tashlit, Rook, and Miss.
she needed Pekasnot, who's her Samwise Gamgee.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I guess. Although, well, they'll get there. Maybe we'll see.
But yeah, no, the Rock is actually her version of the Ring. It's all coming together.
Yeah, it'll
Um,
it'll it'll tracks.
um, yeah, so again, just a line that makes me laugh every time I read it, which is where like, yeah, Tashlit does some sort of CPR to bring Cherrypop back to life, and Rook is like, Cherrypop, that rock is cursed, and Cherrypop just sort of grabs it and is like, it's a good rock, don't lie. It's just like, oh, she's so proud of her rock that fucking Snowdrop took and got them to curse. Like the poor thing.
So good. I want to pull out something else that I really liked from this chapter, which is Miss saying that Maricica had her fake self suggest to the girls that you and I, talking to Rook, were allied, and their reaction or lack of reaction told her enough. She knows, which I think is great, just because if you go back and listen to our episode, I fell for this trick as well. I was like, how did Maricica know about this? I totally would have given it away if I was in that scenario.
I mean that's the fairy bullshit, right? Isn't it? It's no matter
Yeah.
what you do, you've given them what they need.
It's such a classic trick as well to
Yeah,
say something assuming it's true and let the reaction confirm it. Like,
yeah,
it's great that all of the tricks that we would fall for from the Fae are the most basic, but they just work. I guess they're classics for a reason.
yeah, and they use them very well. Like, and this is to Warbo's credit as well. Obviously, the way he's able to bury these tricks in all the nonsense around them. Like, it's not just about the trick; it's about the way you build up the pile of bullshit around it so that it gets lost. It's the needle in the haystack. Like, that's what's so great about this. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Um,
also, this does tell us, for Miss to know that, she was there watching,
yeah.
because Maricica didn't notice.
No.
So that's, God, like, Miss is a really good spy. I mean, this explains how she was able to, like, even yeah, she was, like, effectively spying on, like, Alexander and the other augurs, because she knew so much about them.
Yeah.
Like, she's really good at spying.
She's just a. She's great. Just a great boon to have on the team.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, Cherry is then sent on a mission to help at Jasmine's house by fucking with Marcy. Rook gives her 3 objectives before she heads inside.
Dun, 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 dun.
Etc.
Again, after fucking taking the stone to Mordor, and she's like infiltrating.
We're going through all the hits here. Yeah, what a fun setup for this second half is as well. Like, having Rook explain, like, okay, Cherry, you just need to do these 3 really basic things, and then seeing it inside of Cherry's head as it's almost like I mean, it's like, Mission Impossible or like Ocean's 11 or whatever, where they explain the plan as you're seeing it play out. Rook explains the plan and we see it play out, and Cherry just fucks it up. Or, I mean, doesn't fuck it up. She does very well, but it's just very funny to listen as she does things like immediately forget one of the 3 tasks.
Cherrypop feels like the embodiment of that thing we all do, where you like walk into the kitchen and then you're like, wait, why am I in here again?
Mm.
And then you walk out, and you're like, oh fuck, that's right. Like, I needed to grab my keys that I left on the bench in there, and you go back in there, and then you're back in the room, and you're like, what am I doing in here again? And then you see the keys on the kitchen bench, and it triggers it for you. Like, that's the only reason she gets half this shit done, is because she sees things like the bag, and she's like, oh fuck yeah, the bag.
Mm.
Um, And I mean, this is a great, I think, this is sort of Warbo following through on something. The story's told us a bunch of times when people give instructions to goblins, oh, the goblins will probably forget, you shouldn't be trusting goblins with that many things. And, this is sort of the story kind of demonstrating why exactly that is. Just, I think it's really cool to see the other side of this, where Rook gives Cherrypop three fairly simple instructions, and then we see Cherrypop go in there and kind of get lucky to pull them all off to a degree.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
I
isn't it
just I
great?
just really like the story following up on something that's established like that with, "Oh, don't trust goblins to do stuff."
Yeah.
And also props to Rook for, like,
For
putting this
making it all
plan together.
happen. Yeah.
Like, I'm still kinda writing my Rook might have been a fairy before she was an Oni thing, just
Oh,
because
interesting.
this just, like, I don't know. Maybe
Mm,
that is unfair. I should probably stop trying to focus on that because it's probably, like, the rudest thing you can do to an Oni because it's exactly what they're trying to get away from. Um, but, like, at the very least, she's picked up the skills to sort of feel like she's able to play some chess moves against a fairy, which is just impressive.
mm, yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, the fact that Cherry managed to pull off two of them, almost three, it really speaks to how well Rook did here.
Yeah, the fact that you can get Cherrypop and Peckersnot to kind of pull Maricica to a draw, like,
Yeah.
that's good. Something that doesn't come up actually since we're no longer in Maricica's head. None of them have clocked onto this fact that she's trying to avoid being a fairy. Like, that feels like something that will have to come into it eventually.
Mm.
I just wonder, like, Rook's got to be the person to make that leap, right?
I mean, you'd hope so. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, anyhow, inside, Marcy is sowing some major trouble for Lucy and Verona. Cherry, however, teams up with Peckersnot, and together they manage to disrupt it.
Yeah, they are the heroes we deserve.
They're good, aren't they?
I also I love this vibe. Like, this is the stuff that I just will never get enough of. The uh, magic in the real world stuff of, like, out of Jasmine's sight, Maricica is like shooting vines at them, and they're fighting them like inside the bag. Like, just all that, like, out of the sight of innocence, like magic fighting shit going on under the table. It's always fun.
It is good, isn't it? The extra, tension of having to avoid the line of sight of the innocents makes it delightful.
Yeah, and then when they're both out of it, yeah, like, just, Maricica throwing little bits of shit at them and stuff. Well, not no, they'd throw pieces of shit at her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But yeah, Cherry does really well. She almost
Yeah.
gets 3 out of 3. Mariska also kind of has the rock during the moments where she's interacting with Jasmine. I mean, I don't know if it actually helped or not, but Cherry does very well. Undeniably, she does very, very well here.
Yeah. I got the impression she never quite gets the rock because she almost basically, as soon as she actually gets her shoes, she, like, immediately throws it in the vent or whatever. But yeah, like, I mean, Sherry got one of the important things, which was fucking up the bag, and she did it using the third thing, which was to play good with Peckersnot.
Mm.
Despite her, like, she finds that so hard, but she just
Yeah,
does it. It's so
that's
good.
maybe the hardest of all of them.
Yeah, that was the only one she found difficult, was
Mm.
actually putting up with this guy that she sees herself competing with. It's like, I don't think we've talked about it, but she's got the biggest grudge against Sig as well. Like, that's another one of these just comedy beats spread throughout the chapter. Is just she constantly thinking about how she needs to get revenge on that cigarette. Just like, you're such an idiot, Cherry Pop. I love you.
Yeah. Let's also give some props to Jasmine, who
Yes.
is so good here. Basically, as soon as the playing field isn't unfairly, supernaturally leveled against her, she's able to score some major points. It's very cathartic after the horror show of 12 point.
Yeah, it's really great to see. Yeah, the moment where she finds, like, the shit stained toilet paper or whatever in the bag, she's just immediately like, "Hold on, can you clarify things for me?" And Maricica is not able to keep up with, like, Jasmine just, like, you know vibing with Lucy and just bull rushing past the bullshit. Like, every time Maricica starts to paint these wide pictures, Jasmine's like, "No, no, 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 no. Just answer my question." It's, yeah, very cathartic.
Yeah, it's very good.
Uh, there is this moment though where, like, Jasmine, Maricica says something, I can't quite remember what it was, and Jasmine, like, raises her hand and looks like she's about to slap Maricica, and she sort of stops herself last minute and just asks Maricica to leave. And I was like, I've never been this upset that somebody didn't resort to violence.
Mm.
because just like if she'd slapped her, that would have like completely broken the glamour and stuff, right? Like that would have been a huge win, but also Jasmine can't know that. I cannot bring myself to say that Jasmine should have slapped her, but
Yeah,
like,
no, I mean,
oh,
I'm sure that it would have worked out okay. I don't think Maricica would have ended up taking ownership of Jasmine's innocence, but yeah, let's not chance it.
yeah, no, it's just one of those things where like Jasmine absolutely made the right call with all the information she has, but it's like, oh, if you only understood the crazy bullshit going on here, actually a light slap is the answer, but you did the right thing. Anyway, um we get some interesting details out of Maricica though in this section where she's on the back foot, which I think are worth calling out. The first one is kind of morbid, but Maricica says that she is with an organization that has worked with Cass in the past,
Mm.
which presumably means that the Darkfall Court had an agreement with Cass, which that's fun.
Hmm. Do you think the Dark Fall Court is the group being referred to? Do you think maybe it's just like Kennet as a whole or something?
Maybe, yes. I
And
guess the
Verona is the one
Kenneteers
who's
would be up.
interact with Cass. I don't know.
Or maybe Charles has had something to do with Cass and the organization is the conspiracy. I
Yeah,
don't know.
true, true.
I read it as just being about Darkfall because I'm pretty sure they're the ones who are so affiliated with kidnapping kids.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty grim, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
maybe I'm thinking of Dark Spring, but I thought it was Darkfall.
mm.
Um, but like the other sort of takeaway from this section is like, so Maricica leaves and she kind of gets scared off. She takes flight, she gets away, and Rook sort of is like, "Oh man, we're lucky she's still really bad at this." And like, just to come for that to come sort of at the end of these two chapters we've been talking about today. This is the Maricica who's still an amateur, who's shit at this. Like, that's terrifying. Like, thank goodness Guillerme's kind of freezing out the other way, or he must have been terrifying in his prime.
Yeah, I hope we don't get to see how terrifying Guillerme would be in situations like these.
Yeah, like all this bullshit going on is being framed around the idea that Maricica's not even that good for a fairy. Like,
Yeah,
what a way to talk fairy up.
yeah, it's it's pretty. Yeah,
I mean, hopefully they're all grossly underestimating her, right? That's the takeaway.
yeah, sure. Let's go with that. um, so
So,
yeah.
oh,
Oh,
sorry. So what do you think Maricica was going for by
I,
coming to Jazz's place, and do you think they stopped it?
I mean, obviously, we can't say for sure because fairy operate on levels that
Right.
are
Sure. Sure.
incomprehensible by us mere
Yeah.
mortals. But I think I would guess that it's getting Jasmine to be more of an obstruction to Lucy and Verona going out and doing stuff for Kennet, right?
Yeah.
Like taking them off the board as much as possible.
Yeah, that was my read as well. Like, which I guess like I'm confused about whether Cherrypop and Peckersnot achieved anything with what they did in the house by getting Maricica to leave. Because like Toad Swallow sort of says at one point, I think the damage is already done, and that would be my read. Like Jasmine's new read on this situation is that there's some creepy poop carrying like weirdo going through town right now. That's not going to make her more likely to give the Kenneteers freedoms, right? Like the fact is, it seems Connor and Jasmine were already aware the Kenneteers were missing, were already a bit worried and upset before Mariska even came around. So it's like, to some degree, her showing up has still achieved what it wanted to. And I guess the characters kind of say that, but then I'm like, I guess what did Team Rook get anything out of this?
Mm,
Is it just, I suppose Jasmine's calling other mums now, so maybe people are going to be looking out for Maricica? That
yeah,
that feels thin.
and I think the stage has been set for Verona and Lucy to be able to get out of any potential problems with Jazz, right? Like this feels like they are now more able to explain it away somehow, you know?
No, like I can't, because Jazz now thinks there's a creepy lady who carries poop in her bag after them. Who knows things that she
Mm.
shouldn't know? Like that's gonna.
But Jasmine thinks this is, a local racist, right? Not if it was hey, there's something here where you need to take better care of your children or whatever, or Verona's in danger or something. Jasmine would be very, very unwilling to listen to the trio in how they think it should be handled. Whereas now it's they at least have a seat at the table to discuss. You know what I mean? They're not the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, and they might have the ability to say, "Oh, we know who that is."
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
yeah,
And actually, we want to go and do something that will help get
yeah.
her locked away or whatever.
Hey,
You
hey,
know?
hey, let's get a bunch of innocents, and we're gonna go visit the fairy cave and just like really, like fuck up
Yeah,
Maricica's
yeah.
day.
She's this homeless woman who lives in a cave. Do you want to come check it out? um. Anyway, yeah. So with the rock in tow, Cherry heads back to the forest, and almost all of Kennet is here to keep an eye on the trio. The Kenneteers, emboldened by knowing that they have allies all around them, start to finally score some points.
It's so nice to see just the entirety of Kennet here and like kind of caring. Like
Mm.
my heart warmed when Cherry sort of arrives and notes that yeah, everyone's here. Um,
Yeah, it is very nice, isn't it? Well,
except for Charles.
not everyone. I don't think we get Guillemay there either, do we?
Ooh, no, good point, good point.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, there were some pale predictions that I don't think we pulled out that talked about that actually.
Yeah,
A
uh,
lot of people seem to think Guillemay is going to be involved in how this trial ends.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's the other Fae in town, so it makes sense.
Yeah, true. If anybody can play on their level, uh, I also just love here. You mentioned how the Kenneteers start to get emboldened. It's not just the kid; it's mostly Avery, and I love seeing it be Avery who comes in at the last minute to like think their way out of it because that's something she's constantly beating herself up for being bad at.
Mm,
And that this moment of her being like, "Will you guys back me?" Lucy saying yes, and then like her and Snowdrop holding both of her hands, like it's just such a peak Avery moment. I just felt so good for her.
um, I think I think it's great that it's Avery as well, but also you know Verona's totally fucked in this circumstance, and Lucy the Fae stuff seems like designed to throw Lucy off her game, so it had to kind of be Avery, and I'm very glad that she rose to the challenge.
Well, it just it feels good because she, well for one like for uh, I guess part one of why it feels great that it's her is because she's meant to be the wolf right now and the one who lies in wait, and she just kind of does seem to stand in the back of most of this conversation until she suddenly strikes with her 3 point plan about why this is all bullshit.
Mm,
But yeah, I don't know. It's just also just like I agree, it kind of had to be her, but like in the past, this is something she has kind of failed to step up and do.
mm,
So it's a big sort of moment of growth for her that she was able to do this.
yeah, yeah,
'Cause,
it is a good moment.
like I could see other parts of the story where like the Verona vomiting in the back is still the one who manages to pull this off. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Um, so okay, let's talk about this uh the Cherry having the rock, right?
yeah.
Because she beat the rock on the river, then sorry, yeah, she beat the rock on the river and then kind of lost it or gave it to Marcy before regaining it. Does she have to beat it another time now? I mean, it seems like it's starting to power up again. If she bounces it back to Marissa again after this, I feel like that'll be especially good, and I really do hope that happens.
Uh, yeah, I'm a little unclear. I do think she has to beat it again because there was the whole thing of like the reason she was able to hand it off
Was
is
because
because
she'd beaten
she
it.
had climbed her own mountain. I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember the exact phrasing from 1113.
yeah,
But my understanding is, yeah, essentially, if you beat the stone, then you can hand it off to someone and it gets worse. And so I think what's happened is, yeah, she beat it, and then tried to give it to Maricica, but because Maricica didn't fall for it,
or didn't like touch it or
yeah,
whatever.
it
Yeah,
bounced back. And so now, yeah, like Cherrypop essentially strengthened it, failed to give it away, and got the stronger version thrown back at her,
yeah,
which is just cherrypop.txt. Um, so yeah, I guess she has to. I guess she has to beat it again, and it's stronger. But then, oh man, that third time, like that'll be good.
yeah,
Otherwise, I assume Lucy has the power to undo it. That felt like something Lucy was very conscious of in 11.13. So, however much of Lucy's humanity survives this trial, might be able to sort it out.
mm, yeah. So then another thing worth noting is Miss asks if Edith is secure, and the response is by Montague, which is just suspicious enough to be worth noting, just in case Montague turns out to be bad. I hope he's not.
No, I trust him. He was in that dream with Tashlet. He's our very respectable,
Yeah.
whatever the fuck you meant to call him, guy. I mean, it's good. It's good news for Miss that he's there and not on the barrier, because that's like her big concern. Like we didn't really
Yes.
touch on, like Rook actually has this moment with Miss where she's like, "Are you sure you want to get involved?" And Miss is like, "I have to." And Rook's like, "This is very brave and admirable, but also kind of dumb." And Miss is like, I have to." And I'm just like, "Fuck, I love you, Miss." And then also Rook, like, "Rook, I love you, but Rook is the sort of person who will abandon you in a second if she needs to. I would not want Rook to have my back in an
Yeah,
important fight.
she's not a dependable ally.
No, exactly. You know where she stands, and the problem is you're going to know when she no longer stands with you.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like Monty being with Edith raises an interesting point, which is, as the Aurum reminds us, Edith is bound in a prison set up by the Sable. Monty shouldn't have to augment that.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just like, Monty's whole thing about taking over systems is him taking over something the Sable made. That feels like it could be important. So I've sort of switched sides. Now I'm tinfoiling with you about whether that's suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, hmm.
Because
Yeah.
The Aurum gives us that great reminder where he sort of says, that barrier is put up by the Sable. If that's not good enough, then like, who gives a shit? Because we clearly have nothing to do."
Mm.
Which feels like it could tie into this detail you've pulled out, which is Monty sitting on that barrier apparently.
Mm. 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 Yeah. I don't know. It feels like it could be. We'll have to see, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. No, you've gotten in my head with this one. I can see this being a thing now. I've done a complete 180 in the last 2 minutes.
There we go.
Um, we also learned that Maricica is sending out messenger birds, because of course that's her thing, um, to her allies, which sounds like she's calling in like all, playing all her cards is the vibe I get. Like that thing Toad Swallow said. Who who could she be calling? Like, I mean, it's too late for the story to just introduce a whole new set of characters, right? Like, at least some of these are going to have to be people we know or heavily affiliated with people we know, right?
Possibly people introduced from Marcy's interlude, but I can't think who that would be.
No, there weren't many. Like, I'm thinking, I reckon we're going to see some Blue Heron reunions or something. Like, I reckon, like, maybe not Estrella, but
But who? Why would they be aligned to Marcy?
look, I don't know. Gilame hires witch hunters in his spare time. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like
sure. Yeah, you know what? That's fair enough. Maybe it's
we've just
not.
established the fairy have their fingers in all these pies. Like, yeah, I
I
don't
mean, it
know.
could be like it could be. They could have reached out to witch hunters. She could have reached out to anyone. She doesn't have to be, honest and say, "Hey, come and help me." She could just be pulling shenanigans.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Miss was the one holding the witch hunters back, right?
Mm.
She's not doing that anymore.
Yeah,
How long have we got till
interesting.
they show up?
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh god, this is why I love Wild Boar stories. There are so many moving parts in this bullshit. I can't possibly predict what's going to happen in an arc.
What if it's Shelley? What if somehow Marcy and Shelley are aligned? Or worse, Daniel. That could
Yeah,
actually be it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get somebody from the Plex
Mm,
and somebody from the Blue Heron Institute as some of her allies. Just especially because I'm hoping that more of the wider Blue Heron cast start to come to Kennet for the Kenneteers side, so that'll play nicely if both sides are calling people in.
mm,
I mean, the other part of this that I can't remember where we talked about it. It might have just been on Discord, but like the whole thing with Guillerme hiring witch hunters, and then the fact that witch hunters killed Estrella's whole family, felt like this whole thing where it's kind of weird that the dude in the area who's about to turn into a winter fairy had is affiliated with the group that killed all the Winter Fairy practitioners.
Mm,
Like, it felt like he that might have been Guillermet just kind of making the terrain a bit easier for when he falls.
mm.
Especially because he left all the kids alive and, they might need a mentor. Uh, so as much as Estrella freaks me out, like, her being involved, like, if Maricica can tell Estrella that she thinks Guillermet is the one who got her family killed, then we can expect Estrella and friends to show up in force, right?
Yeah, that would be pretty rough if it's the case. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we can't possibly predict who it's going to be, but I do like the Estrella prediction. I think it's one of the strongest.
I can't wait to see who it is, and then I can't wait to see who the Kenneteers call into. Like, this is going to turn into such a large clusterfuck, and I'm very excited. As Rook says, it's war now, and I'm hyped.
Mm, yeah. Um, So some of the other things that are hype here are the trio start to turn the tables.
Yeah,
They kind of clock to the fact that they what they were going to offer to Marcy is the same as what they offered to Edith, which is a fair trial, and they basically should be entitled to that in this contest. So they earn the license to flip the stage, which who knows what the fuck that's going to mean, but it's an exciting lead in for the next chapter.
yeah, and this feels like a really good resolution to the idea I was pitching before of, like, if this is kind of secretly actually a test of their, like, moral code and their sense of justice, them being able to pull it by doing this, by saying, like, oh, you know we would have done these sorts of things, like, that feels like the way forward. And they don't quite get it
Mm,
with this one, but they get this great one where, like, yeah, they're gonna get to flip the stage, and I'm kind of like, okay, the fuck does this look like?
yeah,
Avery mentions trial by combat, but that can't possibly be their plan, given how fights against Fairy have gone for all of them. Um, I, I wonder how real are these other Fairy in this thing? I'm very confused
well,
by the other members of this
they
stage.
have to have pretty low years of experience, right?
Yeah,
So by that by that they have to basically be not real at all, right? Because like I don't know how they could be actual fairy and not be any more than like a year old.
yeah, like, I'm just thinking that feels like the way to flip it to me is, like, we keep hearing about how Fairy are never really friends. They're always keeping plans to stab each other in the back. The fact that Finnea has brought in 80 other Fae
Yeah,
slash Fae, like, is that the trick? If they can turn the rest of them against her, I don't know if that quite counts as flipping in this sense of, like, trial by combat. I don't know what this. Can they just change which court it is? Maybe use some of their own glamour to fucking switch to a different court,
mm,
pull in Summer Court and have, like, Guillermet ride in on a gallant steed,
yeah, maybe.
whatever the fuck. Yeah, I don't know. I'm extremely hyped for this. I don't quite know what shape it's going to take, but it's a very fun idea.
Yeah, again, I'm racking my brain trying to think of like what could it reasonably be, and it's just impossible to predict this very stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. Especially, like, as we saw in this whole trial, these rules are bullshit. Like, like, you can't predict them once you sort of. And I think, like, one of the best things about this universe is the way that, like, quite a few sort of twists or something will be rules that kind of make sense in retrospect, but do kind of seem like they were impossible to predict beforehand. And I feel like that's sort of what we're heading for with this flip thing, where once you read it, you'll be like, "Oh, obviously that is what you would do," but it's just not the sort of thing like a reasonable person will expect beforehand.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what it's going to end up being.
Yeah.
But they'll have to wait for next time because that's the end of the chapters for today. Before we go though, let's dive into some pale predictions. We had Ace of Sword make a great prediction last time that came true, and let's see if any of our predictions this time come true. Elliot, do you want to start with yours?
Sure. So I pulled out a prediction from Propaganda Pagoda,
Mm.
who, eh, basically says, so paths draw on. Well, they've said the runners. I think they mean finders. Runners is from Stargate Atlantis, or probably something else. I doubt this is a Stargate Atlantis reference. Um, but yeah, basically saying, like, the trains in the promenade seem to bring in acquaintances. So like the fact that people like the ballerina and the wolf showed up, and maybe it's not just random others that get brought in or random lost that get brought in, but it's specifically like ones with connections to the contestants, which I like. It would explain why the wolf would come when there's so many of them, because she's like the common thread with the Forest Ribbon Trail being Finder 101. But basically, so Propaganda Pagoda goes on to sort of say, yeah, so um, there's sort of these unknown knowns where it's going to be somebody you know who comes in on a train, but you don't know exactly who. Like that, so that's their guess at how the trains actually work on here. And so what Propaganda thinks is maybe your reward at the end of the trail is you get a train that takes you to somewhere you like need to go or have been before, but maybe can't get back to.
Mm.
So it's kind of, but again, you don't really get to choose. So it's just like the train will take you somewhere in your past that maybe you need to go, but it's an unknown known, like just this idea that like the train connects you to the rest of the paths and to like places you've walked in the past is a fun idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really like the idea of this reward. I think it's a cool. Would fit with the promenade, right? I think it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. The idea that you get to take the train somewhere else, like the promenade, has just felt like this kind of central hub of all the paths, like in so many ways. So the idea that the reward is just it connects you to other paths makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, Propaganda Pagoda actually predicts that Avery will use it to find Jess Kasabian's like cousin's Echo.
Yeah.
Which like I kind of get the vibe that Jess is pretty close to finding that by herself. So
Yes, I got that vibe too.
I don't know if about that, but yeah, I like this idea of like Avery will sort of get on one of these trains and get somewhere that will just have a bit of a like, oh, this is exactly what we need to get someone on side or to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Um, so I brought a prediction from Snowdrop's Tiny Fan, uh, and the prediction they submitted here is basically the short version of a Reddit post they put up on the subreddit today, which I read and was wonderful. To summarize very briefly, Charles was originally the mastermind, but the original plan was kind of different and more kind of improvised or reactionary to what we're seeing since the Kenneteers have entered the story and Maricica kind of took over. Um, I like this one because we obviously dive in pretty detail oriented on each chapter, so we don't usually zoom back out that much.
Hmm.
But this is a great prediction and a great thread to start prompting thoughts around. Okay, who's the mastermind and what are they actually? What's the motive for killing the Carmine Beast? Basically,
Yeah, and like Snowdrop's Tiny Fan is the person who's got that fucking 4 billion page
huge,
Google
yeah,
Doc on
yeah,
the conspiracy, which has just actually become a resource I check every now and then to like fact check something I half remember. Because if it's at all relevant to the overall conspiracy, it's in there with Snowdrop's Tiny Fan's like objective thoughts about how it relates to other things, as well as the subjective ones. Clearly, like Snowdrop's Tiny Fan has quickly become like the encyclopedia of Pale in a really fun way.
mm, yeah. It's yeah, they're doing great. All the
Yeah.
stuff they've put together is wonderful, and this document is especially wonderful.
Yeah, like this is all the stuff I'm just A, bad at, and B, would never have the time to do.
Yeah,
And like this document is such a resource.
yeah. Um, so yeah, great stuff, great predictions. If you have predictions, you can leave them in our discussion thread, which you can find in the show notes down below.
Well, no, sorry, actually, you should submit them through Power Predictor,
Oh, sorry.
which is also linked in the show
Linked in the show
notes.
notes. Yeah,
The discussion thread would probably be the best place for you to answer our
I,
discussion
I got
question.
my things mixed up, Elliot.
No, yeah, I figured they're right next to each other here in the dock.
Yeah,
Yes, so we're halfway through this fortnight's discussion question, which is if you were subverting yourself to fight a fairy, what practice would you lean into?
yeah.
What animal would your mask be?
I think this is such a great discussion question, and I'm
Yes.
excited to see more responses to it.
Yep, we did. Although I do just want to say we got, I think, one or two answers where people said, this is the practice I do, and then here's the exact opposite. And I don't feel like that's the vibe with this subverting yourself to fight the
Mm.
fairy. I think it's more interesting to say what is the path you chose not to take for whatever reason.
Yeah, if anything, what's the part of your it feels like to me, what's the part of your personality you've intentionally acknowledged and are trying to move away from?
Yeah, exactly. Like what's something about yourself that you have decided you don't want to foster
Yeah.
and
And then
are
what
like
would the
repressing?
practice version of that be, you know?
Yeah. So not that those other answers are irrelevant, but like I just would encourage people to think of these more interesting ideas because it's a more fun nuance in my opinion anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, leave your answer to that in the discussion thread, linked in the show notes down below. If you want to get more of us, you can always check out our Twitter, which is at PowerReflectCast, or just search Power Reflections on Twitter. There'll be live reads on there. They're coming back, Elliot.
Yes, they will be starting up. I think it's the day after this episode comes out. They took a quick kind of unexpected hiatus for 3 weeks, but I'm going to try and do them again because the last 3 weeks I've also ended up reading both chapters a few hours before we record, and I want to stop doing that because it's awful. Um, so yeah, you can check that. That's also where we post news. Like this episode is coming out 2 days later than it normally did, and one day after another episode. And if you want shit like that to be less of a surprise, follow us on Twitter.
Yeah. And of course, head to duffmedia.com for all the other news on all the other shows on the Duff Media Network, and for things like the news on this Pale Conflections fan art contest about siblings. To give all the details, theme is siblings. You have until Friday, July 30th at midnight Pacific Standard Time to submit your responses. There's a cash prize, $100 for first place.
Yep.
$25 for second place. Yeah. Plus, lots of great fan art. Their patrons will be voting on it. So if you want to vote on the fan art, become a patron. There's probably other details as well, but that's the big ones, I think.
Yeah. All the nitty gritty details are in the doc that I'll make sure I put in the show notes for this one. But yeah, $100 prize, end of July. That's basically the TLDR. It is also only other verse things, so it can be pale. It can also be packed. Please sort of. I mean, Ruben and I should be able to tell which it belongs to. I'd be embarrassed if we couldn't, but include it in the email submission anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not no parahumans for this one, just because the other verse is in full swing on Doof at the moment, so we decided to lean in. Also, siblings, we just don't need the siblings art that's going to come out of including parahumans,
especially Ward. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, anything other verse is fair game as well. Like pack dice, poke, whatever. This is that whole universe.
I'm just going to say this now to ensure we don't get the obvious piece of worm fan art. A picture that you submit just of Gru standing by himself
doesn't count.
The joke. We all thought of the joke. Okay, you don't need to make it. We all know what it would have been. Stick to packed and pale fan art.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Oh god, I don't know. Yeah, did you see? Hopefully as well. We will probably be finished, but this, Malia and Jenny will hopefully be doing the costume contest come October because I'm still so mad at us for forgetting to do that last year.
Yeah, no, me too. The costumes were some of my favorite fan art submissions when we did that, and it was a real bummer that we missed it.
They were all parahumans, and then last year we had the opportunity to do a pale pact themed costume competition, and we forgot, and I hated myself for remembering on like November 3rd that it was an option we had. So I'm so glad that even though we might be gone come that time this year, Malia and Jenny are going to be here to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just a little aside I brought up to just mention how much I hate us for forgetting to do that last year.
I feel like a lot of Otherverse fan art, sorry, not fan art, costumes are going to require some form of colored contacts. So start prepping for that now, folks, whether it's blacked out contacts for Matthew, glowing eyes for Edith, colored ones if you're a Kenneteer using their site. Whatever it is, make sure you get your colored contacts in early.
Yeah. So yeah, but for now, also just think about the fan art contest.
Yeah.
That's advice I'm giving to us as well as to you.
Don't plan out too far in front. Just focus on the current one. If you want to support all the things we do at Duff Media, including things like being able to have prizes for these contests, you can support those things by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/duffmedia and become a patron. You get all kinds of cool perks, including the best perk of that warm feeling of knowing that you helped us keep doing these cool things that we try.
Yeah. Also, as Ruben mentioned, it's the patrons who vote who wins the fan art contest. There's also another contest we mentioned last week, Do the King thing, that Scott and Matt are running on Kingslingers. So
Yeah.
you get to vote in that too. Get early access to all that cool Stephen King fanfic stuff. Well, it's not fanfic. It's like Stephen King-ish premises that are your own thing. But yeah, so I'm quite keen to see how those turn out. So yeah, head to Patreon if you want to support us.
Yeah. While you're on Patreon, make sure you check out Warbo's Patreon as well and support him for doing all the cool things he does, like finally giving us this Cherrypop interlude that we all have wanted. That's at patreon.com/Warbo.
Yeah, if people didn't support Warbo on Patreon, this just wouldn't exist. That's crazy.
Yeah. So
Don't let that be reality.
make sure you support him, I suppose.
Cool. Well, we'll see you all next week for presumably more false moves. I mean, that'd be a wild twist if it just ends now.
Yeah. We'll see.